Good afternoon. Now the dust has settled on Northern Rock, for the time being at least. The question is whether it really is business as usual in the housing market. Most people agree that the boom conditions of the last few years have come to an end, but whether that means falling prices or just a levelling off with tighter conditions for mortgages and fewer transactions is much harder to predict. When people talk about the housing market, they're usually referring to their own area, and local trends can be quite different from the national picture. London, for example, rising 3 times faster than the West Midlands. There's also the key question of supply, and here the start of home information packs seems to have boosted the number of homes for sale in the short term, but it might deter sellers in future, especially if demand tails off. As far as mortgages are concerned, the latest figures from the Council for Mortgage Lenders show a drop in the amount loaned in July, but it's too early to judge what's happening this month, other than the fact that many deals have been withdrawn or repriced as the money market crisis develops and its impact on Northern Rock got worse. Now the government and the Bank of England have stepped in with short-term support. The question for new borrowers, as well as those seeking to remortgage, is whether terms will improve over the next few months. That in turn will depend in turn on how much it costs lenders to get hold of the money in the first place, whether the Bank of England decides to cut base rate, and whether action by the Federal Reserve in America, where it all started, is seen to be working. It's a very complicated picture, and if you're planning to buy or sell a house or flat in the run-up to Christmas, you'll need to do some careful planning, as well as arranging a HIP, if it has 3 bedrooms or more. And if you need a remortgage, then should you take the most suitable fixed or tracker rate, or go variable until things settle down, bearing in mind the extra fees that may be payable up front. 08700 100 444 is the Money Box Live number, and with me in the studio to answer your questions, I have Ray Bulger from the brokers John Charcoal, Richard Hare, past president of the National Association of Estate Agents, and Jonathan Davis, spokesman for a website called housepricecrash.co.uk. I take it, Jonathan, you think things are going to get rather worse in the next few years?
I'm afraid to say that's absolutely the case. We're certainly expecting a 30 to 40% fall in house prices nationally over the next 4 to 5 years.
OK, Richard, I take it that's not the way you see it.
Well, we certainly see the dust is settling, and we have had 12 years growth, and any of the end of this sort of period, you must have a slowdown, but clearly we can see a slowdown. We're not the States. We don't have the same issues as they have over there, and we have a major issue here with demand, and that's what's leading the housing market and will continue to do so. And
availability for mortgages, Ray? I mean, there's plenty of supply there, isn't there?
There is, but not as much as there was a couple of months ago. The credit crunch has restricted supply, particularly for people who've got adverse credit. The subprime market is now making mortgages much more expensive and restricting the amount of adverse credit that is allowed. And we've seen a few other cutbacks for high loan-to-value mortgages. A few lenders have pulled out of the 100% market and even the 95% market. So still plenty of supply at the moment, but less competition, and some lenders are deliberately putting rates up to avoid getting business.
But in a word, good or bad news for first-time buyers?
Well, in the medium term, it's actually good news, because as a result of the credit crunch, we're seeing interest rates come down. So fixed rates have already got cheaper, but tracker rates are getting more expensive. So it's a bit of good and a bit of bad.
OK, let's see if we can help Philippa first in Dorset. Philippa.
Hello. I'm in the fortunate position of selling my house and moving in with a partner, so I'll actually be left with a substantial amount of equity. And I'm wondering, is it actually worth reinvesting in the property market out of choice?
I take it you've decided that your partner's house is the best place to live in as your home?
Yes.
Right. Now, does that tell us that you are not able to rent or retain your existing property, or just simply don't want to?
I don't need to. And so I'm wondering that with the money that I'll release, it is the property market. What happens is when I tell people this, everyone says, oh, but you are going to reinvest, aren't you? Don't drop out of the property market.
Or you may never get it back in. Well, let's see what Richard Hare thinks about that.
Well, certainly most people that would have come out of the property market in the last 12 years would have made the decision that that was not the right thing to do. It depends here whether you're looking, Philippa, for a short-term or medium-term solution. If you're looking very short-term, you may decide to rent. If you're looking for any form of medium or long-term solution, go and invest in the property market and get into the buy-to-let market, because you've obviously got plenty of equity there. You're not getting into a situation where you're mortgaging yourself to the hilt to do so. And for medium term, absolutely stay in.
I think the key question here, Jonathan, is you're moving from a situation where you've been living in the place and it's now becoming an investment decision. And the question is, that's the decision.
Yeah.
Now, I think, Jonathan, your view would be there are better investment opportunities elsewhere.
Vincent, the Economist Journal says that the property bubble has been the biggest asset bubble in recorded history in GDP terms. And Richard's absolutely correct. It's been 12 years of fantastic run for people who have certainly made a lot of money in property, but economic cycles come and they go. This is not the time to have excess exposure to this bloated asset class.
I would ask you, Philippa, have you got any other investments?
No.
So you would be thinking of being 100% in property?
That would be my question, really. What to do with that amount of capital?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I mean, 100% seems too much to me. But I mean, I think come back again, Jonathan. And
quite simply, she should speak to an independent financial advisor and get specific, bespoke financial and investment advice.
But in the meantime, Ray, of course, there's some pretty good offers from building societies. 6.9, 7% being offered.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, though, in terms of whether she should buy buy-to-let property at the moment, personally, I wouldn't rush into the market. I'm not expecting a crash, but I do think we're going to see the market flatline for a year or so. We've now got to the stage where the impact of the 5 bank rate rises is hurting enough to mean that people are not able to trade up too much, and we see less buyers. The one result of the credit crunch is that we're now actually likely to see interest rates come down. I think had we have seen bank rate go up above 6%, as some people were forecasting, that would have been pretty horrible for the property market, and we would have seen some bigger falls. But as that hasn't happened, although in the short term, effectively it has, because the money markets have done it, I'm not that bearish. What I think is likely to happen is that we will see significantly reduced levels of activity over the next year or so. That's actually already happening. And inevitably, when you get a quiet market, you get some distressed sellers. So my inclination would be for Philippa to keep her powder dry, but study the markets in the areas she's interested in, and hold off at the moment, but keep an eye open for a bargain, perhaps in 12 months' time, from a distressed seller.
I'd like to make 2 points on what Ray's just said there. Firstly, there has never been an asset bubble in history which has flatlined at the top. They all peak and then they all trough. I may represent housepricecrash.co.uk, but I'm an investment advisor and I'm looking upon this property as an asset class like gold or shares, and it's just another asset class. Secondly, yes, it's entirely true that interest rates may fall in the short term to ease liquidity, etc. And those issues are being discussed elsewhere. However, we have very big inflation issues out there. Sir Ken Morrison, just last week, the chairman of Morrison Supermarkets, said that he expects grocery prices to rise 10% by Christmas. Interest rates may fall, but I expect by 2009 they'll be higher than they are today.
OK, next call is Susan. I'll take your call next.
Hello there. Well, that was partly answered one of my queries. My fixed-rate mortgage is coming to an end at the end of September, and I'm tempted to take another 10-year fixed-rate mortgage term, and I wonder if the team think that's a good idea, or should I take a 2-year tracker, or what?
Right.
Well, I think the first thing to do is to look at where we think interest rates are going, which we've already discussed a bit, and secondly, to look at what the differential is between fixed and tracker rates. Now, if you like long-term fixed rates, Susan, Woolwich have got the best 10-year fixed rate, which is 5.59% with a £9.95 fee, and that gives you a free valuation and free legals on remortgages. You can only overpay by 5% per annum, which is less than most mortgages, so I don't know whether that's important to you. If you want a bit more flexibility, which often if you're going into a long-term deal is important, Coventry have got a very good offset 10-year mortgage at 5.99%, which only has early repayment charges for 5 years, but allows you to make unlimited overpayments as is completely flexible. But that's closing either tomorrow or Wednesday, I forget which. So if you're interested in that, you need to move quickly. So if you want a long-term fix, those are the sort of rates. Now, with tracker rates, we're seeing lenders increase their rates because of money market conditions. So I think you need to make the decision, do you want long-term stability, or do you want to take a short-term punt on interest rates falling far enough to make the tracker rate cheaper? I suspect over the next 2 years the tracker rate will work out cheaper, but you've got to balance that up against the stability of the fix.
I'm just wondering where you think that these interest rates are likely to go, because I'm tempted by the 10-year stability.
It's not just interest rates. I bring Richard in here. You see, interest rates are less relevant if prices are going up. If prices are remaining static or falling, the interest starts to become quite a painful exercise.
Well, it certainly can do. I think that we are in a period, however, at the moment where we are getting used to the idea of interest rates varying somewhere between 4 and 6%.
Yeah, but interest rates essentially because prices have been going up so fast, interest rates have been irrelevant to the equation. You're always going to get an asset.
They're still relevant because they're still very relevant to actually what
cash flow. Your cash flow
of actually what you're paying. We haven't looked at a situation where interest rates have been relevant specifically when you've had a period of no inflation whatsoever. Because I'd certainly, apart from, should we say, very early in the 70s, 74, 75, I can't remember a period when we had a nil inflation. From the point of view of the property market. I don't suppose anyone's really actually looked at that issue.
No. We'll move on now to Judith in Lincolnshire. Judith?
Yes, hello there. My question is rather different. I am 50 years old and I'm about to become, I hope, a first-time buyer because my husband and I have recently split up. Now, I have a big problem with the fact that I have multiple sclerosis, very minorly, but mortgage insurance is almost impossible for me to pay for.
Right.
What
sort of deposit have you got?
Quite a large deposit. I think that I will be able to pay 75% of the property.
Well, in that case, you're only looking for a 25% mortgage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well...
So it's a small mortgage,
right.
But the mortgage insurance on the property is ridiculous.
Okay, well, let's just actually...
I have MS.
Let's just look at the issue you're facing. You need to rehouse yourself, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm in a rental property at the moment.
Right, okay, well, Jonathan, I guess you might well say stay there.
I would. There are far too many risks to the bloated asset class of property right now.
I mean, are you happy where you are with your rental? Is it secure rental?
Yes, it is secure rental, but no rental, I think, is ever secure.
No, because obviously it has a term to it.
Yes, and although it's great, I have a fabulous, landlord and landlady. In 2 or 3 years' time, if they decide to sell the property or whatever, I don't feel secure.
If I may, Judith, it's Jonathan, you can always get a year's lease on the property, so that gives you some semi-stability, or even 2 years lease. And bear in mind that if you put money into another property, you might see it go down the drain.
Well, it's certainly not necessarily down the drain, perhaps, but certainly down. But Ray, on this question, I would have thought a 25% loan to value is very low. I mean, I can't really see what the mortgage insurance has got to do with it at all.
Well, obviously Judith needs to make sure that she can make the mortgage payments. And what I'm slightly puzzled about, Judith, is are you being told that you must have mortgage payment protection insurance, or are you saying that you're trying to buy it and are finding it hard?
Yes, I have been told that I have to buy mortgage protection because I don't have a job at the moment. Even though my husband will be paying me after the divorce a certain amount of money.
So the
mortgage companies, I've contacted 4 or 5 of them. They are not happy with the fact that I don't have a guaranteed income, and because I am disabled, I cannot have. They are saying I cannot have a guaranteed income.
Okay, so
I have to have mortgage protection insurance, and because of the disability, and I'm sure there's an awful lot more disabled people.
So what you're saying is you've approached some lenders direct. Yeah, you need to go and see an independent mortgage advisor. There are some lenders who will give you a mortgage based on the maintenance payments from your husband. And to be told you've got to have mortgage payment protection insurance, frankly, is complete rubbish. In fact, I'd be inclined to report whoever's told you that to the Financial Services Authority, because that is complete mis-selling, because you would not be able to make a claim on it. The fact you're unemployed means you can't claim, and the fact you've got a pre-existing medical condition means you can't claim. So that is completely wrong advice. If you go and see a good independent mortgage advisor, they'll be able to put you straight.
Okay, let's take a couple of emails. This one has come from Paul, and he says, we'd love to buy a flat or a house. We're first-time buyers. Estate agents are offering properties with asking prices that are inflated in our view. The sellers put them on the market, and when they don't receive offers, they just withdraw them, or they rent them. This makes our lives very difficult. What do you say to that, Richard?
There's only a small proportion of people who actually do that. The vast majority of people who actually put their properties on the market will intend to sell. There are a few people that may have an overinflated opinion of their property, and if they don't get it, will then say, right, I'm not going to get that now. And to be fair, that was actually what happened to a fair proportion of people during the last recession through sort of 89 through to 94. We had a remarkable number of people that said, I don't want to sell my house at that figure. I'm going to let it out. And subsequently found 2 years later that actually they were selling it for 15 or 20% less.
It takes a fairly bold person, though, to actually get this change of culture, though, doesn't it? I mean, imagine we're maybe talking, say, about a flat or a house on offer, say, 180,000. They might say, well, I pay 150 for it, but they just get laughed out of the agents. What do you think about that, Jonathan?
Well, don't take my word for it. Landlord.co.uk, which is hardly a bare website, say that many thousands of their members are panic selling. Indeed, this goes after the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors have said that buy-to-let sales are up 44% since the beginning of the year. Buy-to-letters are bailing out.
Well, panic selling maybe not everyone will agree with you. I think Richard clearly doesn't.
Well, clearly the point there is we, with the National Association of Estate Agents and NALA combined, we in our September report, we've actually contacted not just our agents here, this is landlords.
Yeah, but your job, let me define, your job is to say to somebody, look, you will not get that price for this property. But the trouble is, isn't it the case that if they say, well, I want to put it on the market for that price, you haven't got any influence over them, you just have to do what they say.
We'll do exactly what they say. However, the question we asked our landlords was, if house prices were to fall, what would you do? And 2.5% of them said they would come out. Interesting enough, the same figures of our landlords, only 2.5% of them are actually looking for short-term gain. And therefore what I'm saying is that it may be just possible that matching 2.5% of these ones that are coming in for the short-term gain, over 90% of them are saying they would actually remain in the market and stay there.
But the dilemma for this market is, as this emailer makes clear, there are people out there who want to buy properties. They simply cannot afford to buy them at the present level. We don't know whether they'd buy them 5% or 10% cheaper, but I guess maybe 20% cheaper they would say, yeah, that would be a fine. But what they're saying is, will it happen?
The first-time buyer is practically on strike. The only people who've been buying at the base level, the starter home level, in the last 2 or 3 years have been buy-to-let. They've been economically illiterate. They've made stupid financial decisions. Because they've bought at the bottom, the people who lived there were able to sell at ridiculous price, to move up the chain, and so on and so forth. Chains no longer are completing. Prices will fall.
Okay, Ray?
Well, it's a consequence of a slowing market that chains are more difficult to complete. And I've certainly had clients tell us that chains are more difficult at the moment, no question of that. In terms of our experience with our buy-to-let clients, and we have a lot, the professional buy-to-let investors, by which I mean those with 5 or more properties, generally speaking, they are actually looking for opportunities to buy more if prices fall. And the Building Societies Association published a survey last week showing that if prices fell 15%, quite a lot of buy-to-let investors would be looking to buy more. The ones who are selling are the amateur buy-to-let investors who've got 1 or 2 properties. So there's a very big difference between the way different investors look at it.
Okay, let's move on to the calls again, and we'll take Beverly in Ellesmere Port.
Good afternoon. I'm phoning on behalf of my son, who's a mature medical student, and his girlfriend, who's a primary school teacher. Next year, they're looking to buy a place rather than Matthew's live in campus. What is the sort of cheapest type of mortgage they get? I've heard of something where you can half buy and half rent.
Yes, this is shared ownership.
Shared ownership.
Yes, that's right. Usually done through a housing association, Ray?
Yes, the government has a scheme called Open Market Home Buy, which as a teacher your daughter would qualify for. And so that is certainly an option worth considering.
Sorry, what was that called? Open Market?
Open Market Home Buy.
Home Buy.
Yes, the way that works is that they actually own 100% of the property, but they only have to pay a mortgage on 75%. The other 25% costs them nothing in either rent or interest for 5 years, and they retain 75% of any capital gain, and they only suffer 75% if there's a capital loss. So that's a good scheme.
Where do they apply for something like that?
Your daughter should talk to her HR department, either at the school or if they don't have one at the school, at the local authority, because she has to apply through her through her employer.
Right, through her employer.
There will I believe, be some private sector schemes coming into the market over the next year or two, so there may be some other options. But one of the good things with the open market home buy scheme compared with a lot of housing association schemes is not only do you not pay any interest or rent on the 25%, you can buy any property you like. The main restriction is the most you can borrow is 3.5 times the combined income.
Okay, we must move on because there's a lot of calls coming in, and I'll take James next in Manchester.
Hello?
Hello, James.
Yes, no, I would like to ask you, what is the best buy-to-let mortgage on the market, and with what company?
Presumably you're in the buy-to-let market yourself, are you?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Are you?
Well, I've got one already.
You've got one, but not, you only one?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to ask Jonathan to say this, because I think he's going to probably tell you to keep your money in the bank. Jonathan?
If you look at how much rent you can get for buying a property, compare that with a mortgage, and then take account of all the costs of renting out that property, wear and tear, and etc., I think you'll find that the rental yield that you'll receive is far less than you can get in a rock-solid building society.
I can agree with you on, yes, at the moment.
So you think you're going to you want to take the risk, though, do you?
Well, no, I'm just rather interested in what is the best on the market, and then just consider what to do.
Okay, well, let's ask Richard. I mean, presumably there's no lack of choice for people who want to take on a buy-to-let at the moment.
Well, I don't think there's any lack of choice, and to be honest with you, Jonathan will give us a better idea of the exact choices you're going to take. I would just be careful if you're entering into the market of buy-to-let at the moment. There is a period of slight uncertainty. Just think twice, not twice, and then go and do it. Because the fact is that there are hundreds of thousands of people who, over the last principally 5 to 8 years, have actually gone into buy-to-let. They have, over those years, reduced the level of equity that they have. In fact, many of them have substantially reduced the level of mortgage, and therefore increased the level of equity. So they're now in a very strong position for their investment, and probably had a very good investment over the last few years. And I wouldn't want to discourage him to go in any way whatsoever.
The specific question, though, Ray, is the best mortgage? Well, I think one or two principles. I mean, you have to obviously cover the rent. Well, the mortgage has to cover the rental has to cover the mortgage for starters, which means probably you're only going to be able to borrow 75% or something like that.
Yes, I mean, there's no simple answer to this question because it depends on the individuals. But James, are you looking for a possible remortgage, or are you thinking of a mortgage to buy another buy-to-let property?
Oh, yes, bought a mortgage to buy.
Right, okay, fine. Well, the two biggest lenders in the buy-to-let market are BM Solutions, which is part of HBOS Group, or you may know it's Halifax Group, and Mortgage Express. Now, BM Solutions is interesting because 2 months ago they had some absolutely cracking tracker deals where you could get a rate as low as bank rate minus 0.76%, but with a big fee for either 2 or 3 years. They today changed their rates, and their rates actually are now pretty uncompetitive, both their tracker and their fixed rate. So we've had a lender that was the most competitive 2 months ago, now making themselves pretty uncompetitive. But other lenders are more competitive. Mortgage Express certainly has a good range of products, but they're just one of a number of lenders. Most important factor as a starting point is to look at your rental income, because lenders have different criteria in terms of what they'll lend. And if your gross rental yield is relatively low, then you need a lender probably who only requires you to have 100% rental cover and perhaps will base it at pay rate. So there are quite a lot of different things to consider. Whether you go for a tracker or a fixed rate depends on some of the discussions we had earlier, but that's obviously a matter of individual choice. You can get, by the way, some very good lifetime trackers at about bank rate plus 0.6%.
But one thing is, do not rely on future capital growth, as it were, to make ends meet, because therein lies the big question. It may not happen.
Well,
now,
I think on that, Vincent, if you don't believe there's going to be future capital growth, you should not be buying a buy-to-let property.
Well, because the capital growth was covering the difference between the rental and what it was costing you.
I mean, Jonathan's absolutely right. In most cases at the moment, the rental income will not cover the mortgage interest if you have a high loan-to-value and all the other expenses. So only go into buy-to-let if you're taking a long-term view on capital growth.
Now, I'm going to take a couple of calls now, one after the other. First of all, Carmen in Wrexham, you're thinking about buying properties for your daughters.
Yes, I am. I've recently been widowed, and I do have not a huge amount of capital, but some capital. My income is likely to be between £35,000 and £40,000 a year. I work full time, so I would like to help both my daughters on the road to, having homes of their own.
Okay, well, you've got how much capital available?
I'll probably have about 100,000
Okay,
available.
so that's 50,000 each and some income to back it up. Now, Christine, you're in a similar sort of position, but I think slightly different in the sense that your daughter's not got a very good credit record.
That's right, yes. And we're, again, looking to see the best way to help them buy something.
Have you got any capital available?
We could have, probably up to about 30,000.
Right.
But, we don't know whether to do a buy-to-let and get them to rent it out, or whether to have a share in the property.
Okay,
what's the best way to do it?
Right, let's start with you, Richard. What would you advise in this case?
Well, certainly you've got, so far as Carmen's concerned, she's got 2 daughters that she wants to help in there. I think that depending upon the house prices in your area, if you're looking to help them as first-time purchasers, you're certainly going to need a 5% deposit. You may actually, as Ray's saying, that the things are getting tighter, you may well find that you need a 10%. But that's probably the sort of level that you've got to be looking at to help them on with.
What about the financing of this, Ray? I mean, parents being involved, is it a problem?
Well, let's just look at Christine's situation, because hers is very different. Now, if she was to buy a property jointly with her daughter and her son-in-law, then the fact that their credit record is bad would be a key factor, even assuming Christine's is good. So I think in her case, because subprime mortgages, i.e. mortgages for people with adverse credit, have now got very difficult, it might make sense for her to buy the property and let it to them. With Carmen, in Carmen's case, she could consider buying the property jointly. She could let it out, or she could act as a guarantor. There's a number of different options there.
The 50,000 each is a good way to start them off in the property market if that's what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot depends on what the income is of them as well as her. So we need more details. She ought to go and see a good independent mortgage advisor.
But in the end, it will be the amount of income that's available to cover the mortgage payments.
That will be a key factor, absolutely.
Well, a last word from you, Jonathan. I take it you tell them both to go on renting.
A very wise man once said, if something isn't meant to last forever, it probably won't. Property's had its day. Don't buy into property. For the next few years.
We've had a certain difference of opinion amongst the panel. I think we're all agreed, though, that the market is not actually going to suddenly take off in the foreseeable future, and that perhaps first-time buyers will get a look in a way they haven't had recently. We've run out of time, I'm afraid, but our information line is on 0800 044 044 on our website, bbc.co.uk/moneybox, with details, among other things, of our podcast service. Now, I can tell you about a programme tomorrow which you may like to listen to. It's File on 4. The present financial turmoil would have had its roots in those notoriously unpayable American mortgages. But File on 4 report on the British version of the problem. It examines how close some borrowers already are to the edge and asks what might happen to house prices if the credit squeeze tips them over. Well, you've heard what our panel think. We'll see what File on 4 thinks tomorrow. Thanks to Ray Bulger from John Charcoal, Richard Hare from the National Association of Estate Agents, and Jonathan Davis, who's spokesperson for housepricecrash.co.uk. Paul Lewis will be here with Moneybox at noon on Saturday, and for the next few weeks he'll be also here on Monday afternoons to take your calls on Moneybox Live. I'll be back in November.